When you hear about Brazil, the most common things that come to mind are its natural beauty and cultural riches. The country boasts the Amazon rainforest, the Pantanal wetlands, and breathtaking beaches like Copacabana and Ipanema in Rio de Janeiro. These iconic landscapes are often featured in travel documentaries, advertisements, and films, contributing to Brazil's image as a paradise for nature enthusiasts and adventure seekers. The country is also famous for its music genres like samba and bossa nova, its lively carnival celebrations, and its delicious cuisine. Unfortunately, this is all but a facade that fails to portray the real issues with a country that has its ties to the Atlantic slave trade. While Brazil has long been hailed as a beautiful and exotic world destination, a place where carnival thrives and soccer is a religion, it is a nation that harbors a deep-seated hatred for its black population. Despite the country's mosaic of ethnicities, Afro-Brazilians continue to be marginalized, underrepresented, and systematically excluded from critical aspects of Brazilian society. From education to housing, the justice system to political representation, and even the media, the lived experiences of black Brazilians expose a troubling and persistent reality: Brazil's historical legacy of racism and inequality. In this video, we are going to reveal what it's truly like to be black in Brazil, peeling back the layers of Brazil's complex social fabric to expose the stark truths of what it truly means to be black in a country whose progress was built on the backs of African slaves. From examining the challenges faced in accessing quality education to the struggles of finding decent housing, we will shed light on the multifaceted experiences of Afro-Brazilians, whose resilience and determination shine despite the formidable obstacles they encounter. Before we get right into the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to keep informed of our eye-opening black narrative. Brazil is a melting point of cultures of indigenous peoples, Africans brought over during the transatlantic slave trade, European colonizers, and waves of immigrants from all corners of the globe. The roots of Brazil's racial diversity trace back to its indigenous population. Long before the arrival of European colonizers, the land was inhabited by a multitude of indigenous tribes, each with its own distinct language, culture, and customs. These native peoples played a vital role in shaping the Brazilian landscape and culture. However, their population dramatically declined due to diseases brought by the Europeans and violent conflicts, leading to the displacement and marginalization of many indigenous communities. The arrival of Portuguese explorers in the early 16th century marked the beginning of a new era in Brazil's history. The Portuguese colonization introduced European culture, language, and religion to the region. This influx of Portuguese settlers laid the foundation for a predominantly European-descended population that would become known as the White Brazilians. The intermarriage between Portuguese settlers and indigenous people gave rise to a mestizo population known as the caboclos. One of the most significant factors in Brazil's racial diversity is the Atlantic slave trade. Millions of African men, women, and children were forcibly brought to Brazil to work on plantations, in mines, and as domestic servants. The legacy of this brutal system is evident in the substantial Afro-Brazilian population. Over time, African cultural elements profoundly influenced Brazilian music, dance, religion, and cuisine. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Brazil saw an influx of Asian immigrants, primarily from Japan. These immigrants arrived in search of better economic opportunities and established themselves in various regions of Brazil. The Japanese-Brazilian community, known as the Nikkei, has made significant contributions to the country's cultural and economic life. Their presence adds another layer to Brazil's diverse racial composition. While Brazil's racial diversity is a source of pride, it also comes with challenges. The color of one's skin greatly determines their chances of success in the country, which means for black Brazilians and Afro-Brazilians, it is not the best world to live in. This divide stems from a long history that began after the abolition of slavery in 1888. Rather than actively working to integrate black people into society, the Brazilian authorities crafted a carefully constructed narrative of racial harmony. They aimed to portray Brazil as a unique haven where all races coexist peacefully. However, this narrative hides a painful reality that many Brazilians, particularly black and mixed-race individuals, continue to suffer. An estimated 91 million Brazilians are of African ancestry, according to the 2010 census, which found that more than half, 50.7% of the Brazilian population now identified as preto, black, or pardo, mixed ethnicity. Many live in quilombos, which were created by fugitive African slaves during the 17th and 18th century. According to the Fundacao Cultural Palmares, there are around 16 million of these descendants, known as quilombolas, in around 5,000 rural communities across Brazil. The highest concentrations are in once inaccessible areas of Bahia, Para, Mato Grosso, Goiás, and Minas Gerais. Quilombos also exist in major cities like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Quilombos have been recognized since the mid-1990s. Despite their sizable demographic, Afro-Brazilians still face major disadvantages and institutionalized discrimination. The severe inequalities faced by Afro-descendants are reflected in every area of their lives, from health and education to employment and wealth. Being Black in Brazil entails a complex and often challenging journey that spans generations, reaching back to the end of slavery and persisting to the present day. The legacy of slavery left a mark on the lives of Afro-Brazilians, shaping their experiences and influencing their socioeconomic status, access to opportunities, and overall quality of life. The formal abolition of slavery in Brazil came with the signing of the Lei Áurea, Golden Law. However, this watershed moment did not mark the end of the struggles faced by newly emancipated Afro-Brazilians. The promise of freedom was marred by the harsh reality of economic and social exclusion. Many former slaves were left without land, education, or means of support, effectively pushing them into a cycle of poverty. In the years following abolition, Afro-Brazilians continued to face widespread discrimination, prejudice, and economic marginalization. Despite being free, they were denied access to education, decent employment, and political representation. The legacy of slavery lingered in the form of racial segregation and deeply ingrained biases that persisted in Brazilian society. Being Black in Brazil often comes with a sense of invisibility within society, where systemic biases and prejudices persist. This invisibility is frequently reflected in media representation, where Black voices, stories, and perspectives may be underrepresented or misrepresented. Additionally, political offices have historically not done enough to address the specific needs and concerns of the Black community. In media, the underrepresentation of Black Brazilians perpetuates stereotypes and contributes to their marginalization. It can lead to a lack of diverse narratives and perspectives, reinforcing a limited and biased view of Black lives. Black individuals may struggle to find relatable role models in the media, which can have a profound impact on self-esteem and aspirations. Media representations often perpetuated harmful stereotypes about Black Brazilians, depicting them as criminals or reinforcing negative biases. These portrayals further marginalized Afro-Brazilians, creating a damaging cycle of discrimination and stigmatization. In political offices, the concerns and experiences of Black Brazilians have often been overlooked or sidelined. Policies addressing racial inequality may be inadequate or insufficiently enforced, leaving many Black communities without the support they need. Political representation of Black individuals can also be limited, making it challenging to advocate for change from within the system. Structural racism has become deeply entrenched in Brazil's social fabric, with Afro-Brazilians disproportionately affected. They were relegated to the margins of society, living in impoverished urban neighborhoods and facing limited access to healthcare, education, and other essential services. The color of their skin often determined their socioeconomic status, reinforcing a cycle of inequality. Education. Being Black in Brazil often means facing significant challenges when it comes to accessing quality education. These challenges are not a reflection of one's family background or personal aspirations, but are deeply rooted in systemic inequalities that persist within the Brazilian education system. For many Black Brazilians, the pursuit of quality education can be an uphill battle from the outset. Despite having the same aspirations and potential as their white counterparts, they often encounter a range of barriers that hinder their educational opportunities. Disparities in educational opportunities persist, with Afro-Brazilians more likely to attend underfunded schools and face inadequate resources. Many Afro-Brazilian students attend schools in underprivileged neighborhoods that lack basic resources such as textbooks, well-trained teachers, and adequate facilities. In contrast, schools in wealthier areas, which predominantly serve white students, often enjoy better resources and infrastructure. In Rio de Janeiro, a study conducted by the Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística, Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, revealed that schools located in predominantly black neighborhoods receive fewer financial resources from the government compared to those in predominantly white neighborhoods. This disparity directly affects the quality of education Afro-Brazilian students receive. Afro-Brazilians face disparities in both school enrollment and completion rates. A higher percentage of Afro-Brazilian children drop out of school compared to their white peers. This phenomenon can be attributed to a range of factors, including socioeconomic barriers, a lack of support systems, and the persistent effects of historical discrimination. The main Brazilian university in terms of research, number of students, and quality of education is the University of São Paulo. The way of selecting the students is done through a rigorous college entrance exam in which competition is extremely difficult. At the university, 79.5% of the students are white versus 1% of blacks. Only 6% of the students are mulattoes, while 12.9% are Orientals. The population of blacks and mulattoes in the state of São Paulo amounts to 33.1%, while the yellow population does not exceed 1.8%. Thus, blacks and mulattoes are underrepresented in the University of São Paulo by almost 5 times. Income disparities. Being black in Brazil often comes with the harsh reality that earning the best wages and accessing the most lucrative job opportunities can be elusive aspirations. This is not due to any inherent limitations on the part of black Brazilians, but is deeply rooted in systemic racial inequalities that persist within the country's workforce and industries. Income inequality in Brazil is glaring, with Afro-Brazilians consistently earning less than their white counterparts. This income gap persists across various industries and professions. According to data from the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, in 2020, the average monthly income of white workers was approximately 73% higher than that of black workers. This income disparity underscores the systemic bias within the labor market. Whites earn on average 5.25 times the minimum salary. Blacks earn 2.43 times the salary, with mulattoes 2.54 times the minimum salary at the end of every working month. Therefore, the average income of a white person is more than double the average income of a black person. In many cases, black Brazilians find themselves disproportionately represented in lower-paying, less prestigious jobs. They may encounter limited opportunities for career advancement, wage growth, and job security. This wage gap persists even when individuals possess the same qualifications and skills as their white counterparts. Almost 14.6% of blacks are household servants. Only 6.1% of whites work in this function. There are 2.5 times more blacks than whites working in this less qualified activity. Among mulattoes, the percentage is 8.4%. Discrimination within the workplace is another significant challenge. Black employees may face bias in hiring, promotions, and performance evaluations, which can hinder their professional growth. These experiences of discrimination can also contribute to a hostile work environment, adversely affecting job satisfaction and overall well-being. Criminal justice system. One of the most disturbing consequences of structural racism in Brazil is the disproportionate presence of Afro-Brazilians within the country's criminal justice system. Afro-Brazilians often find themselves targeted by law enforcement solely because of the color of their skin. Racial profiling and police violence have been persistent issues, with many cases of excessive use of force leading to tragic outcomes. The case of Amarildo de Souza, a construction worker and resident of Rio de Janeiro's Rosina favela, garnered international attention. In 2013, Amarildo was taken into police custody for a routine questioning and was never seen again. His disappearance sparked outrage and protests, shedding light on the violence faced by Afro-Brazilians at the hands of the police. Overall, Afro-Brazilians are more likely to be arrested compared to their white counterparts for the same offenses. This disparity in arrest rates begins early in life, with Afro-Brazilian youth facing higher chances of interaction with the criminal justice system. In 2020, data from the Brazilian Public Security Forum revealed that black individuals in Brazil were 2.7 times more likely to be victims of lethal violence than white individuals. This alarming statistic reflects the disproportionate targeting of Afro-Brazilians by both law enforcement and criminal actors. Even when Afro-Brazilians are arrested for non-violent offenses, they often face harsher sentencing compared to white individuals. This disparity in sentencing contributes to the overcrowding of prisons with Afro-Brazilian inmates. The rate of imprisonment per racial group in Sao Paulo is 76.8 for every 100,000 white inhabitants and 140 for every 100,000 mulattoes, increasing to 421 for every 100,000 Negroes. This means that a black person has 5.4 more chances to be in prison than a white one. While whites are underrepresented in the prisons of Sao Paulo, blacks are overrepresented. According to the Department of Penitentiary Matters of Sao Paulo, in a research done in one of its prisons in 1997, whites, Negroes, and mulattoes had differing sentences according to the crimes they committed. With homicides, the average sentence for whites was 20.1 years. For mulattoes, this charge resulted in 25 years, and for Negroes, 35.7. Besides, whites had fewer convictions than Negroes, 1.4 convictions against 1.8. This means that besides being convicted more often, their sentences are proportionally longer. All of these data allow us to come to a simple conclusion. Whites have better living standards, more access to education, better jobs and salaries, attend public universities more, free of charge, participate less than Negroes in the justice system because they are less prosecuted, imprisoned, and convicted. If it is true that after the abolition of the slaves, Brazil had not erected a new system of racial segregation, with prohibition of marriages between whites and Negroes, or legal prohibition of Negroes from attending all white schools, it is also true that this brief list of data shows us that, in regard to racial matters, Brazil are at least an unjust country. In the 21st century, statistics reveal a sobering truth about racial inequality in Brazil. Black and brown Brazilians bear the brunt of police violence, lack access to education, and face limited representation in decision-making circles. Being black in Brazil also means you get to be part of a staggering 64% of the unemployed population, and you are almost 3 times more likely to fall victim to homicides. This staggering inequality is reflected in their income as well. On average, they earn only half of what their white counterparts do. Profound inequality is also evident in cities too, with many Afro-Brazilians forced to reside in the most dangerous urban areas. With little opportunity to improve their lives, young Afro-Brazilian men in particular have been drawn into drug gangs and violence, an acute issue in a country where, according to the Mexico-based organization Seguridad, 19 of the 50 most violent cities in the world are located. Afro-descendant youth have been disproportionately exposed to these threats. Homicide remains the main cause of death among Brazilian youth, particularly affecting young black males living in favelas and urban areas. Faced with situations of extreme violence, police and state security forces frequently resort to the use of lethal force in an effort to curb the violence. Brazil remains one of the most violent countries in the world, with an estimated 61,600 homicides in 2016. Of these, black male youth are the most vulnerable, with police executions no exception. Of the 4,224 people executed by police in 2016, more than 3/4, 76%, were black, and 80% aged between 12 and 29. The situation grew even worse the following year. In 2017, 63,880 people lost their lives, an increase of 3%, and again the majority of victims were young, male, poor, and black. Bringing an end to black discrimination in Brazil is an ongoing and complex struggle, made even more challenging by the fact that black individuals are often shut out of the political sphere. This exclusion from political representation exacerbates the systemic racism and discrimination that persist in the country. Black representation in Brazilian politics has historically been characterized by significant underrepresentation and systemic challenges. Despite being a country with one of the largest black populations outside of Africa, Afro-Brazilians have struggled to gain equitable access to political power and influence. Black people constitute just 18% of Congress and a mere 4.7% of executives in major companies. The underrepresentation of black individuals in Brazilian politics is evident at various levels of government, from local municipalities to the federal level. This underrepresentation extends to both elected positions and key political appointments, limiting the capacity of Afro-Brazilians to shape policies that directly impact their communities. One contributing factor to the underrepresentation of Afro-Brazilians in politics is the persistent racial and socioeconomic disparities that limit their access to education and resources. These disparities create barriers to entry for individuals seeking political office, as many lack the necessary resources, networks, and educational opportunities to pursue a career in politics. The racial divide in Brazil's political landscape is also reflected in the racial composition of political parties. Many political parties in Brazil have historically been led and dominated by white elites, making it challenging for black individuals to ascend to leadership positions within these parties. Also, campaign financing and fundraising often favor candidates with established networks and financial resources, perpetuating the exclusion of Afro-Brazilians who may lack access to such resources. This financial barrier hinders the ability of black candidates to compete effectively in elections. Brazil's deeply rooted racial prejudices and stereotypes have also played a role in limiting black representation in politics. Negative stereotypes and biases against black individuals can affect their electability and lead to discriminatory treatment by voters, political opponents, and the media. Despite these challenges, there have been notable achievements in increasing black representation in Brazilian politics in recent years. Quota systems and affirmative action policies such as the Lei de Cotas, quota law, have been implemented to promote diversity in public office, leading to an increase in the number of Afro-Brazilian elected officials in some regions. Nonetheless, achieving equitable representation for Afro-Brazilians remains an ongoing struggle. The path to greater black representation in Brazilian politics involves addressing systemic racism, promoting educational opportunities, and reforming campaign financing practices to level the playing field for all aspiring politicians. Even with the progress being made, there is still a long way to go, as Brazil continues to focus on whiteness and promoting white superiority. In recent years, racial tensions have flared, exacerbated by the election of a far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro. His inflammatory rhetoric has fueled animosity, sparking clashes between different racial groups. The situation has worsened with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disproportionately affected black Brazilians. Already earning 57% of the average white income, they have been hit harder by job losses and fatalities. The police's use of force, often fatal, has escalated dramatically, with police brutality reaching alarming levels. In an alarming twist, an anti-crime bill was passed, offering police officers a broad self-defense justification, which critics argue allows excessive force to go unchecked. Vice President Hamilton Mourão's assertion that racism doesn't exist in Brazil underscores the state's denial of its deep-rooted issues. This denial only perpetuates the suffering of black Brazilians as they continue to face systemic racism and discrimination on a daily basis. The experience of being black in Brazil is unfortunately marked by pervasive racism, systemic discrimination, and a daily struggle for equality. This narrative is not intended to perpetuate a hopeless outlook, but rather to shed light on the stark realities faced by black Brazilians in their quest for justice and equality. From education and employment to housing and healthcare, systemic biases persist, undermining the aspirations and potential of countless individuals solely because of the color of their skin. The historical legacy of slavery and colonialism continues to cast a long shadow, manifesting itself in a society where opportunities are often determined by racial identity. The underrepresentation and misrepresentation of black voices in media, coupled with limited political representation, further contribute to this marginalization. These factors collectively reinforce a sense of invisibility for black Brazilians, as their stories, contributions, and concerns are often overlooked or misrepresented. However, it is crucial to emphasize that the black community in Brazil is not passive in the face of these challenges. Throughout history, black Brazilians have demonstrated resilience, strength, and a relentless commitment to achieving equality. Movements, organizations, and individuals are actively working to dismantle the structures of racism and discrimination, advocating for change and justice on multiple fronts. While the road to achieving racial equality in Brazil is long and arduous, progress is being made. Public awareness of racial issues is growing, and there is increasing acknowledgement of the need for systemic change. The fight for a more just and equitable society, where one's opportunities are not determined by the color of their skin, continues. This brings us to the end of this video. Tell us what you think in the comment section, as we are always interested in your thoughts. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos to let more people know the truth about blacks and to hear their own part of the narratives. Thanks for watching.